Hey there everyone, it's GG Sober Sun. April 17th, 24 hours a day, book reading. Every time we go to an AA meeting, every time we say the Lord's Prayer, every time we have a quiet time before breakfast, we're paying a premium on our insurance against taking that first drink. And every time we help another alcoholic, we're making a large payment on our drink insurance. We're making sure that our policy doesn't lapse. Am I building up an endowment in serenity, peace, and happiness that will put me on easy street for the rest of my life? Well, I definitely agree with that. But it has to be for a lifetime that I do it. You know, I can't just, my tendency is to do a good work and then coast on the feel good of that good work. And I often will refer back to it in my mind. And it's like some comedian said one time that he was, sitting in first class. He's a pretty famous comedian, I guess. Sitting in first class on an airplane, and then a soldier got on in uniform and was kind of making his way toward the back. And then he thought to himself, maybe I'll just give up my seat for this guy. Support the troops, and he said the feel good, just thinking about it was enough for him to just feel pretty good about himself, that he even thought about doing that, and he just didn't end up doing anything, and or you get the one-off type thing. But service work, working with others, definitely, and not just thinking about service work or working with others or doing good for others, but actually doing it, gets me out of me, for sure. Gets me out of my own head and focus outward rather than inward and on my quote-unquote problems. So it's important to do these things, go to meetings, make it a priority to go to several meetings a week. In my early recovery, I only went to about 2 meetings a week, but I went to them religiously. And there was only about 4 of us that were regular at those meetings. And, it was, it wasn't a great idea. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I really believe that if you go to 90 meetings in 90 days, you get to see what the fellowship is all about, and hopefully get to a place where you can say, all right, I don't like everybody, and that's okay. You know what I mean? There's people that rub me the wrong way, and there's people that talk out of their ass, and yeah, there are people like that, but the alternative is, like me in my case, I felt like everybody spoke for AA, right? Everybody was an AA guru that was in the rooms when I got there. And so when their information conflicted, it really messed me up. Or if I saw that there was a personality conflict among AA members, it really messed me up. I don't know why. I put everybody on pedestals. And I remember my first sponsor that I asked to be my sponsor during a meeting, he elbowed me. He was sitting next to me. He elbowed me and goes, "Come on, And we went outside so he could smoke a cigarette. I didn't smoke at the time, I don't think. And he was like, oh, I can't listen to another blah blah so-and-so's dissertation on recovery. And I was just like, huh? I don't understand it. I never got up and walked out of a meeting, to smoke a cigarette or otherwise. It's just weird to me. But anyway, I don't want to end on that note. But it's important to get that out of your system early. You know what I mean? And decide whether you're going to go along with that kind of thing. And so the more meetings you go to, the better. Going to meetings and hearing the Serenity Prayer. I'll never forget realizing that the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And it seemed like a transactional thing. You know what I mean? But not that that's an issue, not that that's my point. My point is that I finally went to enough meetings and heard the Lord's Prayer enough times to where I started meditating on it. You know what I mean? And so that to me is important. Go to a lot of meetings. What else are you gonna do? You know what I mean? If it wasn't that bad, maybe you know what I mean. Your drinking wasn't bad enough. Maybe you need to do some more experimenting. But God forbid you go back out and you drink again and get yourself in a worse situation. But it's got to be urgent. It's got to be important. I had a new family at the time. And that was my justification for not going to a lot of meetings. They all had moved into my world on a military base rather than on the British economy. So I felt a certain amount of responsibility to be present for whatever reason. The important thing was for me to get sober. But I wasn't asked to give up altogether. In fact, my former spouse, I remember when we were both drinking, I knew because of my early experience with Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16 years old, that the abstinence was the only real solution to alcoholism. And I remember talking to her about that at the time, and she was like, I don't think you need to give up altogether. And that was early on when we were dating. But we were close, but we were dating. And just, she thought, you just need to know when to say when. And I knew at that time, expecting an alcoholic to moderate their drinking is like expecting an alligator to nibble. And it wasn't happening. Meditation for the day. I gain faith by my own experience of God's power in my life. The constant, persistent recognition of God's Spirit in all my personal relationships, the ever accumulating weight of evidence in support of God's guidance, the numberless instances in which seeming chance or wonderful coincidence can be traced to God's purpose in my life. All these things gradually engender a feeling of wonder, humility, and gratitude to God. These in turn are followed by a more sure and abiding faith in God and His purposes. Oh wow, that's really well written. Oh my gosh, that's so true. We had a great meeting this morning at my home group. And we talked about humility, and some newcomers were talking about some of their experiences, their God moments. One woman has only been coming to meetings since last Tuesday, and she's already experiencing, more quality time with their kids. And she said something about going out on the dock and looking up at the stars and They weren't out there but about 3 minutes, she said, because it was so cold, and in that amount of time they saw a shooting star. And it's just like a little God wink, you know what I mean? Atta girl, keep going, you know? And oh man, that kind of stuff really fires me up. And you may say it's a coincidence, right? But it really is in the eye of the beholder. And I was right there with her, you know what I mean? Like, absolutely, that's God's atta girl, you know? And I love that kind of stuff. And yeah, we can get complacent sometimes, though, in AA about miracles. We get so used to seeing miracles. And is a shooting star a miracle? You know, when you catch it, it sure feels like it sometimes, you know? And if you're looking with mystical eyes, you will see the mystical. I had an example in my early recovery where a guy said, when you start looking at the world with spiritual eyes, you start seeing spiritual things. And he equated it to kind of like, he said, when I got my new car, he said, I'd never driven a Mazda before. And he said, I got in this Mazda and started driving it around. I owned it. I got into it. And he said, I never knew there were so many Mazdas on the road. It was like, they're all over the place. You just start noticing stuff like that. So it's kind of a lame equivalent, but it's kind of makes the point, really. So, prayer for the day. I pray that my faith may be strengthened every day. I pray that I may find confirmation of my life in the good things that have come into my life. And my goodness, when you start looking through eyes of gratitude, you start seeing all kinds of good things if you're willing, you know? And when you get sober and you start seeing good things happening and you realize it's not you, it's basically only a decision to get help, right? And then the world starts opening up and you start seeing wonderful things like, you know, bushes. The grass looks literally greener, you know, the sun looks brighter, the ocean looks clearer, you know, the birds sweeter. I don't know, you know, stuff like that. But anyway, it's a great life. Keep coming back. Thanks for letting me share. Look up, aim up, rise up. Love y'all.